And we're live. Good morning with HeleCloud Talks Cloud. You're here because you want to hear about reInvent, but what I want to tell you is that the week before reInvent, HeleCloud, a Software One company, went through the managed services partnership audit with AWS, and we're the latest and greatest MSP partner of AWS, and it took like 3 years to prepare for this. So it's an awesome achievement, super overwhelming. Hopefully, like reInvent was for you. Or was it, Alex?
Actually, I had a fantastic time, and weirdly, I've been to many, many conferences, but it was my first time at reInvent. Historically, I've always been doing it remotely, so for me, I think it was a great event. Really enjoyed both, some of the meetings that we attended in the background, but also managing to get time, as it's often difficult to do in such a busy week, to actually spend a bit of time doing some sessions, doing some learning, and also some community stuff as well. So for me, one of the things I enjoy most about this whole world is the community we have built up, and sitting down and talking to people about their real business problems and what they're trying to solve and how that maps with what we're doing. So I had an absolutely brilliant time. What about you, Walter?
Yeah, it's great. It's funny because obviously there were less people because we're still at the tail end of a certain pandemic, and so I've been many times before, and so seeing certain rooms that were half empty because there just simply were less people was like I was simultaneously weirded out and delighted that you can actually have some space.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I walked away from the first session, and I was really my brain got all activated, going like, "Oh my god, I missed being in a conference with a bunch of people and just listening to someone else's story and really being inspired by it." So
All those human beings,
definitely very happy to be there.
Yeah. What about you, Dob?
Indeed, it was very good to see the world going back to normal. And yes, we all had face coverings, and yes, it was a much smaller reInvent as well. But I think this much smaller reInvent was contributed to a much more intimate experience as well. I remember the early days of AWS when we would gather everyone that wanted to hear about us in a room for 20 people and discuss EC2. And then I remember reInvent 2019 with 46,000 people and queuing to get on a shuttle between the 11 venues that they had then, and overflow capacity rooms and crowds of people walking between sessions as well. And I think that was far too busy as well. Going back to a much more compact reInvent with, I heard 9,000 people, and then someone said 20,000, but whatever it was, much smaller, 2 or 3 times smaller than reInvent in 2019. Again, brought back memories and the cozy feeling of intimacy that you get in a slightly less crowded place, and also bumping into all the friends, colleagues, and customers sometimes as well, partners, and being able to talk to people, as Alex said, was actually quite beneficial for me as well. After 2 years spent on mostly video calls, so a very, very good experience. Not necessarily because of the content, which was very good as well, but much more because of the fact that we got together as a community, and because world is going back to normal, and AWS is there to unite us.
And everything was in walking distance. Oh my god.
Mm.
Just be
Yes.
able to walk from one place to another was great.
I
Yeah.
was quite pleased. I only did 16,000 steps a day. I was expecting to do in the 20, so it actually worked out quite well.
Yeah, yeah. Normally 20 is the minimum.
Yeah. Lazy people do 20. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I didn't actually go to reInvent because in Bulgaria there were visa restrictions. So this is why it was such a small event because no, Bulgarians couldn't make it. But what did you like most about, or rather, what was the, Alex, what was the most insightful thing that you heard? Like, what was the game changer for you? Was there a game changer for you?
Insightful. I don't know if I'll say insightful, but I'll say the thing that I was really pleased to see the most was the focus on sustainability. So there was a few things that were brought up in the sustainability kind of sphere, things like the new tooling, the carbon footprint tool, that you can actually get an idea of just how much energy your organization is consuming, and therefore off the back of that, what's your global impact? I thought that was actually fantastic. And then on top of that, the idea of this new well-architected framework pillar around sustainability. So interestingly, I think there's quite a close alignment between the cost optimization pillar and the sustainability pillar, because ultimately, if you're pulling down your costs, you're reducing your utilization, you're actually going to have a lesser ecological impact. But I think for me, it was something that's been almost needed for a while, just to really drive home that message and remind people that you can architect sustainably, you can take advantage of even simple things like spot instances, a real drive with the utilization of serverless as an example, as ways to bring down your utilization, be more efficient for you as an organization, but ultimately also then have a lower impact on the world as a whole.
Yeah, I really like the shared responsibility model that they put forward,
that.
just like the shared responsibility of the security space, where they said, okay, we can do a bunch of stuff by making processors more power efficient and putting in better cooling and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also do a lot of things by just simply not running code is a lot more sustainable than running code. And,
yes.
they're starting to make that message to the crowd even in the keynotes is really a strong message, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about you, Doug? What did you like?
I liked this and other things as well, but I want to continue on the same topic, if that's okay, before I talk about some of the other things which I found very interesting. I think that's spot on. The sustainability angle to reInvent was a very, very interesting one. And as we all know, sustainability is very big on everyone's agenda. That's something that everyone is talking about in mass media, and not just activists as well. And pretty much the whole world is passionate about what's happening from a green perspective and sustainability perspective, and everyone has got an agenda, and that has ended or resulted in organizations becoming more sustainable themselves, and investors actually applying pressure on their portfolio companies to become greener. And what we're also seeing is exchanges, including the London Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, publishing information about the green credentials of companies listed on these exchanges. So similar to the share price of these organizations, their sustainability is going to be one of the investment criteria that people are going to consider as they buy or sell stocks. When I say people, obviously mean large organizations that would be trading on these markets as well. So your tradability and liquidity will probably depend on your green credentials as well.
Will
the question
it,
about, sorry?
Will it though? Do you think that actually, like if you're a business and you want to do business with another company, that's going to be a deciding factor? You're going to look at it, but is it really going to be a deciding factor, do you think?
It is already happening, and that's happening without regulatory pressure. That's happening because of the mass attitude to sustainability or lack thereof. But at some point, there is going to be regulatory pressure as well. And the question is, cloud sustainable has been there for the last 11 years, which is the time that I've been doing AWS. At every point in time, there would be someone coming and asking questions about sustainability. I think AWS, and that's probably the case with other public cloud providers as well, have a great story. And it's the story about density and you increasing density substantially in a cloud-based environment, and also elasticity as well, which contributes to the improving density. Clearly also because AWS builds data centers in a very cost-efficient way, which happens to be very sustainable as well. And all of these are great stories, but they have always been a bit fluffy. They've always been, yes, AWS builds in a sustainable fashion because they want to pay lower bills from an energy perspective. But yes, there is these details, and there is wind farms, and there is tidal waves and everything else that contributes to green energy. But it was never. It's always been a very qualitative conversation as opposed to quantitative, with the ability to see how green you are on AWS, you're actually already quantifying what you as an organization are doing when it comes to your green agenda. So it's not just black and white, yes, I'm sustainable, not sustainable. You can see how sustainable you are. And you've got a clear measure that allows you to see pretty much in real time whether your sustainability agenda is met by the way you are utilizing your IT or not. So I think that's very, very powerful. And again, I see that as something that organizations are absolutely going to embrace. And again, going back to your point, Lina, investors are putting pressure on their portfolio companies even today and divesting from companies which cannot demonstrate green credentials. So I think, funnily enough, not coming again from a technological angle, but coming from a mass perception and attitude to a green world angle, we are going to see a lot more adoption of AWS, not because of all the technological merits that we know exist, but because of such a brave move of quantifying the sustainability of cloud.
I think, Lena, what you said, that you wonder if companies really care. I think that what it boils down to is that individual people care, and they push their own company asking, hey, what are we doing? And because of that, the company starts having a set of principles and then starts applying that pressure to their suppliers. And obviously AWS is the lowest link in that supply chain in a way. And therefore, people asking this, I've seen software coming up in the last couple of years that is trying to calculate the sustainability and the footprint. But obviously, that's just guesswork if you don't have the actual original numbers. So I think that AWS giving in and making that a big thing is really good. And I think the statement of putting it into the well-architected framework and adding a sixth pillar is a really strong one, because that has been 5 pillars for forever. And adding a sixth pillar must have been a fairly significant conversation, because it means a lot of changes across the board, not just for AWS, but also for all of the companies that are following the well-architected.
The other thing, just one last thing on there, I was thinking was, you look at COP26 and you look at the what governments are now subsequently doing. It's not going to be that long before governments globally are starting to push more and more on companies and large organizations to be more sustainable, through regulation, etc. And therefore, what's a really easy way for you to then, improve your ecological footprint? It's actually to be able to measure it, use a system, like the tooling that they have within AWS, move to the cloud, become more sustainable, and be able to measure and report back on the differences that you've had from where you've been to where you are now. So I think it'll actually enable organizations to become more sustainable, even if they don't particularly want to, just to, in order to meet government regulation.
Yeah, I understand. It's just I'm coming from a background of helping airlines be more fuel efficient, and they would send briefing and debriefing reports to pilots, and they would try to paint all the trees and make it about the environment. But at the end of the day, it's about money, and
there's no reason those two cannot go hand in hand, though.
Absolutely. So I like the metric that apart from cost optimization, there's a metric for sustainability. I was just expressing doubts that this is the way that it's at an early stage. But I'd like to think that companies will look at it more and will be evaluated against it.
They absolutely are. Larry, think of BlackRock was driving an agenda for BlackRock to completely divest from fossil fuel investments. And I think that's going to take a while, given the size of BlackRock and how big of an asset manager they are, and all their shareholdings in the likes of ExxonMobil and others. But when BlackRock starts moving off non-sustainable stocks, which happen to be in the S&P 500 portfolio, something big is happening from an investment perspective, and we'll see the impact of that.
So before everyone drops from the podcast and moves on to something more interesting, What was an actual like technological breakthrough for you from the reInvent keynotes?
Well, for my sorry, go ahead,
Go
Walter.
ahead. No, you go first.
No, I was going to say, I think, and we discussed it multiple times in this forum and with other colleagues at reInvent as well. Something which is interesting is that reInvent was not that rich when it comes to new announcements, or at least not when it comes to technological announcements. Yes, there were
Last
the
year,
casual. Sorry.
like last year.
It's probably similar to last year as well, but that's exactly my point. The trend has really become to release new features on a daily basis, and there is another 10, 15, 20 announcements that we continue to see from AWS on an ongoing basis. And rather than piling up announcements and waiting for reInvent to release all the goodness that they have been developing for a year, AWS are pretty much releasing announcements as they become available. And therefore, reInvent is much more of a celebration of everything that has been announced for the last year and of customer stories, given the strong customer obsession that AWS and the wider Amazon have always proclaimed. And far less a celebration of each and every feature on stage, which was the case with the earlier reInvents. But at the same time, despite the fact that there is no such huge announcements, I think reInvent continues to be a community event, and that's something that I liked as well, as we discussed earlier. The fact that a community of like-minded individuals that are passionate about public cloud and in particular about AWS get together and discuss customer stories, discuss technologies, discuss challenges as well, are able to collaborate with each other, but also with solutions architects, professional services people, account managers from AWS. I think that continues to be very important.
And
I
of
think
course, managed services partners like us. But Walter, I
Yes.
will continue to do that. Walter, you had some impressions about the AIML keynotes.
Yeah, so one of the things I really liked is that first of all, the AIML keynote was moved to a prime time slot. So previously it used to be somewhere in the afternoon, which kind of it still was a keynote, but it wasn't in a morning slot. And now you see the three keynotes in the morning slots. They're really the thing that attract audience in the big hall on the big stage. I think it's a really good thing to see. The other thing that I really liked is that it's talking much more about data now. So the recognition that in order to do any kind of data science, you need the data part of the science before you can get to the AI and ML part. I think that's really good. So quite a bit of emphasis on simple things like databases and data lakes and that kind of stuff is for me something I'm very happy to see. The other thing I really like to answer your previous question, because I want to mention it, is the 5G in a box stuff. Unfortunately, it will be US only, and I doubt that we'll see this in Europe anytime soon. But the premise that you can buy or rent 5G equipment from AWS and set up a 5G network that is owned and operated by you on a shared spectrum anywhere you so wish is really a phenomenal achievement in my opinion.
it's been so interesting. Oh, sorry, Lena.
Yeah, I'm going to make a joke. I'm sorry, but I wonder what all the conspiracy theorists about COVID vaccines and 5G are going to make out of this announcement. End of joke. Alex, go on with the serious stuff.
Well, I was going to say, I actually on that front, I've had my 2 shots, but I haven't had my booster, so I only get 4 bars at the moment. I'm hoping the booster will improve it.
Yeah, you need a booster shot. That's it. You need the vaccine in a box.
Yeah, so I think on the 5G front, Walter, I completely agree with you. I think it's fascinating. It's really interesting to see where AWS has taken their messaging over the years as well. When you compare, in the go back 5-10 years, it was really about bringing things closer to the center and focusing on how do we, to your point earlier, Dob, about efficiency and so forth. We bring all this to the middle. We centralize, we rationalize, and we gain efficiency. But actually, the last I'd say, 3 years or so, a lot of the messaging has then started moving further and further towards the edge, and AWS have recognized, and we all knew that this was the case. You can't put everything in the middle. It would be great to, and it'd be so much simpler, but you are always going to have the use cases that you're going to require local access to things, low latency, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, where AWS has now recognized that and shifted their messaging, they're now looking at, the 5G piece, the cloud WAN piece, because, ultimately, if you want connectivity to all of your locations, you can go through an ISP, or now AWS is becoming a virtual ISP, sitting, software-defined networking on top of whatever bits of string you happen to go into your different sites. And then similarly, the last one I thought was interesting on that front was local zones. So they've now released another 30 local zones, which were originally US centric. Now that's going global. I think there's a couple in LATAM, there's a few in Europe, et cetera, and that just providing again the need to hit that low latency requirement, which is why customers in some cases still to this day have their mini DCs sitting in their basements, because they do need that.
And I think so. We immediately got an email from our partner manager here in the Netherlands, because they announced one of the local zones in the Netherlands. So they were quite excited because obviously it opens up new opportunities here. But to your earlier point, I think what's happening is that if you consider public cloud to be an island in the middle of a lake, you can't tell people on the mainland, hey, you should be on this island, without building bridges to get there. And stuff like these 5G networks, stuff like OpenShift, stuff like VMC on AWS, they're all enablers for customers to start a hybrid journey. And the hope is that eventually they will move entirely to public cloud, or as much as possible. And I think that with some of the edge stuff and the local zones, they're more acknowledging that there's a fair chance that companies will actually stay in a hybrid space and do whatever they can on AWS, and whatever they cannot, do it locally. So you also saw announcements about Outposts now having 1U and 2U servers instead of a whole rack, and that immediately enables much more possibilities for small branch offices. What are they going to do with a whole rack full of servers? Nothing, but make it a 1U situation, and all of a sudden we have a whole different conversation. So I think those enablers are really cool.
Completely agree. So you also, the other thing you mentioned, I just want to go back to one of your earlier points, Walter. You were talking about the data journey for customers, and actually the recognition that we would all love to do predictive analytics and machine learning tomorrow, but there's a set of steps to get there, aren't there? You've got to go through the gathering of the data. You've got to actually be able to understand what you have there, start to get some analysis and analytics and data points out of there, some actually, something you can utilize as a business. And then you look at that predictive part of the journey. I think one of the things I thought was interesting was the whole, just more generally at reInvent, there was a much larger volume of noise around serverless. And the fact that they've now adjusted some of these services like SageMaker, EMR, MSK, Redshift, etc., to be a serverless service, I think speaks volumes as to how they want to encourage customers and say, look, you can actually start to make footsteps in this journey without having to worry as much about the infrastructure. Because it is, it's complex. Sizing up, what do I need to do in terms of how much capacity I need for Redshift or for an MSK, how many shards I need and all these kind of things. That's complex for customers. So one of the things I think AWS always does well is actually just making things easier for customers to consume. Now, what's interesting with some of the serverless here is that you are still going to have certain things you're going to have to pay for regardless. So I think, for example, on, if I remember rightly, SageMaker, maybe on MSK and EMR, you're going to have some baseline costs that you're going to have to cover regardless. And then it's more about scaling up and down. But if you take Redshift as an example, if you're doing some form of analysis work on your data warehouse, you're probably not doing it 24/7. You may be running, a whole bunch of batch jobs in a certain time window and that kind of thing to be able to do a daily data analysis. So why do I need to be running all of that infrastructure the entire day? Why not just, spin it up and spin it back down? And actually, if you're using the compute that is maybe in the out of hours window for a particular region, all of a sudden that's making, yet back to the ecology side of things, even more, efficient use of that infrastructure. So I think I really like the fact that they're taking that serverless albeit, that's probably more of the way I'd look at it is more like orchestration with, a commercial benefit to it.
Yeah,
What
I mean,
is the availability of AI/ML as well, because for the MSP audit that we managed to get, we explored a lot Amazon Forecast and also DevOps Guru. And Amazon Forecast is doing a pretty good job without a lot of AI/ML skills to help you have predictive monitoring. And also DevOps Guru is helping a lot with metric correlation. So I think they've managed to get the value of using AML in a more easy to use way.
yeah, and you see so there's two directions that we're going in, right? So you have the SageMaker line where they're trying to make it easier for not so data sciencey people to do data science stuff. And then you have the higher level services that are making use of AI/ML knowledge that AWS has themselves, that really create things like the what do they call it, DevOps Guru for RDS. I guess is quite interesting service. Like, I come from a MySQL consulting background, and over you're solving the same problems, but you have to look for the patterns to figure out what the actual problem is. So
Yeah.
having an AI/ML algorithm that can do, even if it can do 50% of that job for you, it's a huge win. And AWS sits on enough data to train those models accurately, because they have that much information.
Well, it begs the question: what's the next stage after that as well? Because if we look at typical IT operations, a lot of the activities that frontline IT ops people are doing are very, very similar every single day. So if we take this as step one, what could step 2, 3, and 4 be in terms of actually how you analyze an operating system or whatever, find fault and resolve? If we can, I just go back to my original days. And I won't say, let's say a number of years ago when I was a frontline engineer, and I would follow the same process consistently to actually delve down into a problem. So if we can automate some of that, all the better.
Agreed. You can focus on the interesting stuff.
Indeed, and that's probably a blasphemy for all the technical people out there, myself including. But I absolutely agree with the trend of moving services and making them more accessible to end users, even to business users. And we saw announcements around AWS Amplify and how much easier it is going to be to develop web and mobile applications by using the Amplify Studio, for instance, which pretty much means that business people can develop their own applications without ever becoming developers at all, which really plays to the tune of the citizen developers concept. We've had Amazon Quicksite for a while indeed, and Quicksite is your business intelligence tooling for business people. You don't really need to understand databases or data warehousing. And I know that Lina is going to disagree, but I said that's what I caveated that with, that it's a blasphemy for technical people. But it is bringing the capabilities to the business users, and whether that's your artificial intelligence and machine learning story, Lina, whether that's Quicksite for much more linear business analysis, whether that's Amplify for software development. All of these are going to be bringing IT much closer to the masses, and perhaps that's the future of cloud as well, because it's pretty much everyone on this call. We quite often talk to communications experts, and they ask us for predictions of what is going to happen with cloud next year, in 5 years, in 10 years as well. It may be the case, and if we look at AWS, that's a trend that we can very clearly see, that the future of cloud is much closer to the end user, in the same way that through virtualization we abstracted away from kit, and we no longer, and for many years, have really stopped caring what the underlying architecture is, what kit you're running underneath, what is your network connectivity. All of these have been abstracted away, and public clouds abstracted us away from infrastructure altogether by introducing the concepts of software as a service and platform as a service. So today we've got including HeleCloud software teams, orchestrating business processes by providing just the plumbing between various different cloud-based components. And the future may well be business enablement and far less platform and software as a service, and citizen developers using the AWS platform for the purposes of using natural language processing and natural tools of any description, voice interfaces to interact with their data and applications. And if we look at what AWS is doing, I think that's a trend that we can very clearly spot.
Yep. I think there was one other service that they released or feature they released, which adds even further more to your point. The AWS Marketplace for Containers Anywhere. There we go. It's a mouthful, but I got it right first time, so I'm quite happy with myself there. But it's yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's a memorable title, but actually, to your point, it's about making it easier for business users and customers to consume without the need to go through the lengthy process of a full architecture, to go through the some of the consulting that you might need to do to get to the outcome you need. You need an application, it's available off the shelf, it's built on a reference architecture. You take the application, you drop it into your Kubernetes cluster, wherever that happens to be, and you can start to consume that and get business value from it very, very quickly. And again, back to the point, is AWS is just making it easier and easier for consumers or customers or organizations to take those on board.
And it should, because there's a myriad of services and a myriad of ways that you can use them. And whether or not you're using a partner or you're going at it alone, even with us as a certified partner with a lot of skill in-house, it's still very challenging. So it has to become easier to operate so that people can get the full benefit from running things on AWS.
Agreed. Did we have until 11, or what's the time?
20, I think it is. Go
on. I think it's also worth to talk a little bit about the CDK.
Oh yeah.
Announced version 2 of CDK.
Automation is dying. Did you call it?
Well, that's how you can look at it. But two interesting things happened. First of all, CloudFormation, they acknowledge that CloudFormation is not going anywhere, just that CDK has a version 2. But the other interesting thing was that there's a support for Terraform-based account vending machines in Control Tower. And that is one of the first acknowledgements in a mainline AWS service that Terraform is an actual thing. And I've always been flabbergasted in previous reInvents how you can have 45,000 people talking about AWS for a whole week and then manage to keep Terraform out of the entire conversation. And so acknowledging that, I think, is in AWS's best interest.
But at the same time, exams like the SysOps are now requiring a hands-on CloudFormation part. So what's up with that?
Yeah, well, I think that what they mentioned is that each team that is delivering a service is responsible for introducing the CloudFormation support, and the CDK stuff is a more global effort, combined with this whole effort to get to a more standardized API design where you use the same verbs regardless of what the service is, and that's a more globalized effort. And I really liked how they mentioned it, that each of these teams are not necessarily interacting. They're responsible for their stuff, for their customers, and for how customers use their service. And by doing it that way, they can keep moving fast, because if they have to coordinate and synchronize everything centrally all the time, it's just going to grind to a halt.
The thing is, as well, is it's a bit like, I mean, I did a computer science degree even earlier than when I was an engineer. We won't go into the dates again. But the point there being, you learn the basic constructs, you learn the semantics of how to develop your cloud. And so CloudFormation is a great way for you to learn to do that. And then you can shift, syntax wise, to any other form of way of describing that environment, whether that be Terraform or something else. So I don't think it's actually a bad thing for AWS to say that you should understand CloudFormation, because in many environments, first of all, you won't be a pure Terraform house, for example. You might have mostly Terraform, but chunks of CloudFormation here and there, or vice versa. So I think having engineers learn that as a baseline, absolutely nothing wrong with it. The interesting thing I thought on CDK, I know we talked about it. Does it mean CloudFormation is history and so forth? So CDK calls, if I remember rightly, CDK actually calls CloudFormation on the underlying, doesn't it? So CDK sits in front of it, simplifies what you can do, but then calls a bunch of CloudFormation on the back end. I think that has its, I suppose, both benefits and drawbacks, because if you're an old hat at AWS and you've been in it for years like we have, right? You understand that when you, like, there was on the stage, I thought it was a fascinating actual talk from one of the gentlemen from, I forget the insurance company who represented, but he said they took 1,500 lines of CloudFormation and turned it into 14 lines of CDK. Amazing. But if you're brand new to AWS, or you're brand new to the cloud, and you write 14 lines, do you know what's actually going to happen in the background there? Do you know the impact of the decisions that you're making? Because they talked about it being, I forget the phrase they used, but they basically said the idea is it's all about best practice in the background. So you make this call in CDK and it's going to go do a bunch of stuff. But that might not be exactly what you would want for your environment. And if you don't understand the implications of that because you haven't gone through that, gotten the scar tissue from building out CloudFormation over the years, you may not understand the implications of what you're actually pulling with CDK in the first place. So I think CloudFormation, Terraform, whatever, are going to be around for a lot longer because people want that level of control as well as the ability to simplify and just consume. And then one last thought on that as well is CDK is built on, you can use it in Java and Go. I think Go's just recently, Python, .NET, etc. Great. But that then means that your development teams need to be consistent in which languages that they are programming in. Otherwise, you can't take a bit of code from one team and pass it over to another one. Whereas you work with CloudFormation, Terraform, whatever, that's much more portable because everybody's already working to that standard. So I think it puts more onus on the development teams to work closer together in order to make sure that they can reutilize what they're already building.
I think the reason CDK was introduced is because at some point people figured out that it's easier to teach a developer how to write the infrastructure as code than it is to teach an ops person how to develop. And a lot of companies have told me that, like, we showed Terraform to our developers. In 2 days, they wrote the entire infrastructure as code. And it was very easy to them. But I don't know where it's going to go, because it still needs the operational mindset.
It's not just the mindset. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. So what we see with our customers is that we have more and more customers who have never had an ops department. So you have these startups that grow into scale-ups, and because of all the serverless stuff, they've just had their devs take care of stuff in a very ad hoc fashion, which brings you to a certain level, and then it falls apart, and then they come to us, and as a certified MSP
Thank you,
provider, we then get to deal with all of the technical depth that they didn't realize they incurred, because simply if you never look with an ops view to your infrastructure as code, and often this is CDK, you think that everything is hunky-dory until you start peeling off the wallpaper, and then the whole wall comes down. So there's definitely something interesting there that you can get. It enables you to go faster and harder without deeper skills, but eventually it turns out a complex problem needs a complex solution, and simplifying that is only going to get you so far. At least that's how I see it.
I don't know, simple solutions to complex problems exist, but yeah, the problem is that everyone wants to create and no one wants to do any maintenance. So you can, as you said, you can only go so far with just touching it here and there, and then at the end it's still a spaghetti monster. But what do you wanted to say, Dob, about not just the ops mindset?
No, it's indeed. I think the company that Alex was talking about was Guardian Life Insurance, and yeah, I think it's a great story, and I like the way it was portrayed. I think there was a lot of passion in the way the gentleman on stage, and the name escapes me, delivered it as well. Something that I disagree with, exactly to your point, Lina, is that the way it was delivered was like your infrastructure people are no longer required. It's all for developers, so it's the developers that are doing the coding. And to me, that's confusing things big time. And I think we need to be very clear about that. Everyone is a developer, perhaps from the perspective of writing code, because this is the way in which you interact with cloud. You're no longer going to be in a data center, on a data center floor, carrying boxes with routers, switches, firewalls, servers, storage arrays, and everything else. That's not the way to do it. You write code, and that's the way you orchestrate and interact with your infrastructure. So everyone is a developer from that perspective, and I absolutely get that. At the same time, I think it's very important to recognize, and that's exactly what the DevOps mindset and culture is for, is that we're going to have people that have knowledge and skills in different areas of IT. And yes, they are going to be security specialists, and they're developers in terms of, yes, they write scripts and they codify compliance, and they also manage your firewall rules or your keys or whatever else there may be to manage from a security perspective, but their subject expertise is in security and compliance, and they're not software developers, they're not orchestrating business applications, they're the experts in security and compliance. And you're in a similar fashion, you're going to have networking people, you're going to have AI ML people, you're going to have business analysis people, etc. And yes, each and every one of them is a coder in their own right, but not necessarily a general purpose software developer. I think that's something that we need to continue to recognize. While everything is code, and all of these different subject matter experts are going to be using code to express themselves, it's still very important to recognize that multiple domains of knowledge will continue to exist. Cloud is not amalgamating the knowledge, it is unifying the way in which we interact. And I think that's a very important distinction, which I thought in this specific keynote, which I quite liked, I have to admit, otherwise was a bit blurred, and I think that's dangerous.
A very different type of question. What was the best social event that you attended?
Alex?
It's also about reInvent, right? So we have to also talk about reInvent a little bit.
So actually, I didn't go to very many of the parties. I was slightly disappointed in myself for not having done so. I know, but I had some really enjoyable meals with both customers and colleagues. So very, very, to the point about social. For me, these events are as much about the networking part and actually talking to other humans as it is about the rest of it. So I attended one or two of the smaller parties and stuff, and that was great. But actually, I think the thing I enjoyed most was going out for meals with individuals and having a more in-depth conversation than you can sometimes have when you're in the wider social situation. Definitely. What about you, Walter? Were you partying until the wee hours?
Yeah, I really there was a dinner with some Software One people on Monday night. That was quite enjoyable. And the party that I really enjoyed, also a smaller scale party, because in general I'm not a big party type of person, especially not at a conference, because I want to be able to talk to people.
It's called a party animal. Say I'm not a party animal, or I am a party.
I am not a party animal.
Okay.
In a professional setting, let's put that disclaimer there.
You either are.
But, the party I really liked was actually not a party. It was a gathering at Top Golf, is one of those golf courses with the Benelux community.
Yes.
And it's just it's funny because you all fly around the world to the other side of the planet just to meet each other for a game of golf. And I am horribly bad at golf, and I've played twice in my life before, and that was both at Top Golf, at reInvent. But it was really nice to see everyone in the Benelux community. Is really nice because we all are competitors in daily business life, but then in these community events we can all be friendly to each other and just talk about things without going into the competitive side of things. For me,
You were playing golf. It can be competitive, but I think that because you weren't good at golf, you did not see it as competitive. So What about you, Dob? How did you socialize? Was there any game day that you attended, or?
No, you know me. So I think this answer is very clear. Unfortunately, no parties for me. Similar to Alex. I had plenty of structured and semi-structured conversations over dinner, and that's how far the social side of mine, not just dinner, drinks as well, but had plenty of lunches and dinners, working lunches and dinners, coffees, teas, and pretty much everything else. To me, and I like the fact that there is plenty of parties that appeal to a very wide spectrum of people at reInvent. But at least my nature is such that when I communicate, I do it to exchange information, and the social side complements that. But it cannot be just the social side; there has to be an exchange of information as well. Going to many of these parties for me is. Especially the more noisy ones, does not allow me to exchange much information because I need to shout and perhaps I don't even hear what others are saying. And when the communications element is lacking, the social side for me struggles as well. So I'm afraid I skip the parties and in a very boring fashion, participating in much quieter dinners. Plenty of them.
Well, the shouting's also a little trickier when you got a mask over your face
And
as well, because you can't even lip read it when it's loud. It's interesting.
I want to promise our audience that next year I'll have a visa and I'll fly over to reInvent, and then I'll come back and it's not going to be boring like these three. The full Las Vegas experience and tell people what reInvent can be and to the fullest extent possible, because it can't be just keynotes and masks, right?
Yeah.
Well, Lena, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So even when you do, you
not
won't
with my big mouth.
You won't be able to. That's against Vegas.
Do you know? There's one last thing I wanted to highlight, which I think links really well to what we're talking about. So I really enjoy going to those social events. Probably the ones where it's not like super loud music, one where you can have a bit more of a conversation. And part of the thing that you then build up through that is, these networks of fantastic people in the community who are working together. They're sharing ideas. It doesn't matter who you work for, whether it's a competitor or a customer or whatever, and you're talking about the same kind of problems that you're all having. And I thought that AWS this year made an extra effort to call out that community in several different ways. So if we look at the keynotes, they had a very specific call out about all of the AWS Heroes, which is their equivalent of, a vExpert or an MVP. I thought it was really good to call that out because those are the people who are driving grassroots adoption, grassroots knowledge, and enablement to all of these people. They awarded the chap that we were talking about before from the insurance company. He was one of those AWS heroes, and they actually gave him a presentation on stage, which I thought was brilliant. It can't have been easy also for him to get up there and talk to that massive 20,000 people live, and then I don't know how many people they would have had online.
Have Warner Vogel's bow for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool feeling.
It's amazing. And then at the same time, they also announced Repost, which I think is the idea is it's a bit of an AWS equivalent to Stack Overflow, something along those lines. So again, trying to support that grassroots community, the ability for people to, kind of get together and chew the fat over various problems. And that, for me, whether it be at the event or all of these things that they're doing around it and the way that the community is supporting, I thought it was great for AWS to actually have some focus and really call that out.
Yep, agreed.
Repost, though, what kind of a name is that for a platform where you don't want people to repost?
Yes. Just check the FAQ. That's going to be the repost every time.
Yeah, they should just go at the RTFM or something. Something more inviting, yeah. All right, well, it's the end of our time, and I hope that everyone who listened enjoyed. And it was great having you, Alex, Dob, and Walter, to share your experiences of reInvent, because you were privileged enough to be there, unlike me. So I'm hoping that we managed to spread information and joy to everyone who either, like me, watched from the office or their home, or just didn't get to watch or read anything. So have a great day, everyone. And remember, the MSP audit is super complicated and very high score. So that's like the seal of approval, if anything. So yeah. Have
no
a
one
great.
ever had any doubts about you, Lena, and the team smashing it. And I think it was just a milestone that we had gone through, that we had to go through. But very well done for all the perseverance and getting it to a successful end. And of course, it's just a step in the journey because there is many more budgets that need to.
MSSP next.
Yes, indeed, next week.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Cheers.
Bye.